Hey there, Slashaholics. This is your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian with an exciting offer for you. You can go to www.80stees.com right now and find shirts from your favorite TV shows, movies, cartoons, horror movies, video games, and more. And there's so much more than just shirts. So head on over to 80stees.com where we've partnered up to bring you an amazing offer. 30% off your purchase at checkout with promo code SLASHTRACKS30. Freddy Krueger's Tales of Terror. Fatal Games by Bruce Richards. Chapter 32. The next day after school, Chip was hurrying to football practice. It was the second and final day of tryouts, and Chip knew he hadn't played very impressively the day before. If he didn't shine today, he could kiss the quarterback position goodbye. Coach Cutler glanced up from his clipboard when he saw Chip trotting toward him. He blew his whistle shrilly and gathered the team around him as Chip jogged up. To Chip's surprise, he saw Barney Peters standing at Cutler's side. His face was heavily bandaged. "All right, guys, listen up," Coach Cutler bellowed so loudly Chip winced. "I've been hearing some nasty rumors circulating around the school, and I want to clear this thing up right now." He nodded to Barney. "Go ahead, Peters." Barney spoke painfully in a soft voice. Everyone had had to lean in to hear what he was saying. "I had an accident yesterday, and I said some stupid things, real stupid things, mostly to Parker." Barney gestured to Chip, "The new guy over here. I accused him of pushing me down the stairs, but it never happened. He was just the first guy I saw after I fell, and I guess I wasn't thinking straight, and so I blamed him." Barney looked down at his feet as if studying his toes. "You never think straight, Peters," someone cracked from the back. "Way to go, Peters," someone else chortled. "He probably chirped over those giant feet of his," another guy cracked, and the whole team laughed, including Chip and Barney and Coach Cutler. Only Al didn't laugh. Chip noticed. Al was looking over everybody's head, in a world of his own, his football helmet tucked beneath his arm. Coach Cutler nudged Barney. Barney stepped forward and offered Chip his hand. Chip took it and shook it firmly. "All right, everyone, let's get back to work." Coach Cutler blew the whistle again, signaling that the players should get out onto the field so practice could begin. "You offensive linemen better start protecting your quarterback better, or you'll all be doing extra laps after practice," Coach Cutler shouted after them before turning his attention to Al. Al stood alone, his pale blue eyes reflecting the sunlight. He was staring at Chip. "Parker, Al Parker, take the free safety position," Cutler hollered. "What about quarterback?" Al asked sullenly. "I want my shot at quarterback. Maybe if there's time after practice. I want Dawson to run a few plays, and then I want to take a look at Chip again." Al reluctantly slipped his helmet on, glaring at Chip the entire time. "Let's hustle it up, Al Parker," Coach Cutler said, "and try not to kill your brother this time." Try not to kill your brother this time. So it was Al who had leveled him yesterday. What had gotten into him lately? His brother was going totally bonkers. Since they had been living on Elm Street, Al had become increasingly reclusive, and Chip noticed he was spending more and more time in the basement. Last night, after the police and fire engines had left, Chip had been in his room when he heard Al drive up in the van. Al went straight to the basement, and Chip could hear him through the air vent again, talking to himself. The smell of McDonald's burgers had wafted up through the vent as well. Chip had caught a few phrases, something about Scott Martin, but most of the words were unintelligible. Chip had been so tired and disgusted by the evening's events that he wasn't even tempted to eavesdrop on his brother's ramblings. Chip heard Coach Cutler call his name, and his thoughts returned to practice. He couldn't afford to daydream now, not if he wanted to be quarterback. Chip jogged over to the coach. "I'm going to let Dawson run a few plays so you can get an idea of the way your offense works, which is what I should have done yesterday," Cutler admitted. "So why don't you stick with Peters for now? He'll answer any questions you might have about the offense." Cutler glanced at Barney, who was standing on the sidelines painfully picking at one of his bandages. "If he can," Coach added. Chip nodded and jogged over to Barney. "You okay, big guy?" "Yeah," Barney grumbled. "I'm going to need some serious dental work, but I guess I never was much to look at anyway." Chip laughed. "Thanks for straightening things out for me with the team. I'm sorry it happened. I thought maybe I saw you ahead of me on the steps, and I had this weird feeling that you were going to be pushed. Not by me, of course, but by someone. I don't know how to explain it." "I was pushed," Barney said in a soft voice. His words sent a shiver down Chip's back. "Huh?" "I was pushed," Barney said firmly. "I just don't think it was you. I've got a cousin who goes to Middleton. I talked to him on the phone. He says you're a good guy, so I probably screwed up identifying you, but I know for sure I was pushed." Chip felt dazed. "So who pushed you? Do you have any idea?" Barney shrugged. "It was too crowded to tell, but I definitely felt someone give me a shove." He glanced at Chip. "Did you see?" "No, not really," Chip stammered. He didn't want to accuse Al and be mistaken. "Well, if I ever find out, that guy is dead meat." Barney ran his tongue over what was left of his front teeth. Chip had to look away. His gaze shifted to the football field, where a play was already in progress. They were in a zone defensive, and most of the receivers were staying out of Al's territory. Chip noticed, bad news travels fast. One play, and Al's reputation as a heavy hitter was securely in place, and his reputation as a dirty player. A forearm shiver to the head was one of the dirtiest plays in football. Its sole purpose was to maim the quarterback to take him out of the game. "Run!" Chip heard some of the defensive guys yell, alerting the rest of the defense that the passing play had broken down and the quarterback was scrambling for his life. Chip and Barney stepped back as Roger the Dodger Dawson scampered up the sidelines towards them, the defense covering him at a sharp angle. Roger should have gone out of bounds. It's what the defense thought he was going to do. But instead, Roger tried to cross them up and cut back against the grain, against the wall of defenders rushing his way. Again, Al racing over from his free safety position. Al planted his thick, heavily padded shoulder in Roger's midsection and took the smaller boy off his feet, slamming him hard into the turf. A clean but brutal shot. The ball bounced loose. Al tossed Roger aside as if he were a rag doll, scooped up the ball and started running in the opposite direction, high-stepping it all the way. He didn't stop until he danced into the end zone with the ball held arrogantly above his head. "That Parker kid can hit," Chip heard Coach Cutler say with admiration from a little way down the sideline. Chip glanced at Al in the end zone, exchanging high fives with some of the defensive players. Then he looked back at Roger, on his back, still writhing on the ground in agony. His mouth twisted into a wide O of pain. One leg bent at an impossible angle. "My leg!" Roger screamed. "He broke my leg!" Chapter 33. Boomer zipped his wheelchair over to where Roger lay prone on the ground. He motioned frantically to the team trainer. "Get a stretcher fast!" "He needs an ambulance," Chip heard Barney mutter next to him. Coach Cutler slammed his clipboard to the ground when he saw that Roger was injured. "God damn it," he fumed. "That's 2 quarterbacks I've lost in 2 days. Who's next?" "Me," Chip thought, strapping on his helmet. He was the only one left. The team trainer ran out onto the field, followed by 2 second-string players carrying a stretcher. They gingerly lifted Roger and placed him on the stretcher. Chip started toward Coach Cutler when he saw the jagged bone poking through Roger's skin just below the knee. Chip jogged past the stretcher, purposely averting his eyes, but he couldn't shut out Roger's torturous cries of pain. "I'm kind of running out of options here," Coach Cutler confided in Chip, almost apologetically. "We've got a big game Saturday, and I have to suit someone up who knows how to play our kind of offense. You think you can run a few plays?" "Absolutely," Chip said, feeling like the next lamb on the way to the slaughterhouse. Coach Cutler blew the whistle and gathered the team around him. It looks like Dawson's going to be out of action for a while." A few of the team members glanced back to where Roger's stretcher rested by the stadium exit. In the distance, a siren wailed. Al stared off into the blue sky, a sky as light and blue as his cold eyes. "Let's take it easy out there, fellas, okay?" Coach Cutler implored. "I want you guys to play hard, even in practice, but I also want to be able to suit up enough guys to play our next game. So let's keep our heads up out there, especially you offensive guards and tackles. Protect your quarterback, okay? Let's go!" Coach Cutler clapped his hands. The team responded with an unenthusiastic clap. "I can't hear you!" Coach Cutler bellowed like a Marine boot camp drill instructor. The team responded a little more forcefully, then took the field. All except for Al. He was staring at Coach Cutler and Chip. Cutler referred to his clipboard. "Let's try that slant pattern again," he said to Chip, who was standing next to him. "What about me?" Al asked. Yeah, Parker. That hit looked clean on Dawson. Don't worry about it." Cutler glanced anxiously in Roger's direction. The ambulance had just arrived. "Just take it a little easier on our own players, okay?" "I wasn't worried about it," Al said calmly. "I just wanted to know when I was going to get my shot at quarterback." "Let's cross that bridge when we come to it, shall we?" Coach Cutler said curtly, dismissing Al. "Stick with the free safety position for now. Maybe next week or the week after that I'll have some plays diagrammed for you. Some plays better suited to your style of play, just in case we need you." Al fumed, but said nothing. As Chip jogged out to the field, Al sidled up to him. "Be prepared to cross some bridges of your own, bro," Al said, his voice full of malice. Chip ignored him and joined the huddle. He knew the coach wanted him to run a slant play, but since Al had heard him say it, Chip didn't think it was a very good idea. "Who's the fastest guy on the team?" Chip asked. A lean, whippet-like boy raised his hand. "But Stevie Fumbleeasy's got hands of steel," someone said, and a few of the players laughed. "Don't worry about it," Chip said. He locked gazes with Stevie. "Just head up the far sideline as fast as you can." "I'm supposed to stay in to help with the protection," Stevie started to say. "Don't worry about it. Just head up the sideline as fast as you can go." Chip fixed the other receiver with his steady brown eyes, the receiver who had run out of bounds the day before. "Stay in bounds this time," Chip said firmly, his voice commanding. "My brother will try to come over from the free safety position and drive you out of bounds like he did before. It's an old trick of his. Don't fall for it again." The receiver nodded, listening intently. The whole team was attentive now. "And watch out for his forearm, Justin," the big guard named Sam said. "That's another trick of his." Some guys chuckled, but not Justin. As Chip broke the huddle, he felt a steely resolve wash over him. He was going to win that quarterback position, and he was going to do it now. Coach Cutler's screeching whistle caught his attention. The coach was over on the sideline, striding back and forth, clapping his hands. "Let's go offense!" the coach shouted to Chip through cupped hands. Boomer was nervously wheeling up and down the sidelines in his wheelchair, right behind Cutler, with Cutler's clipboard in his lap, trying to keep up with the coach's nervous pacing. Chip lined the team up. On 3, the ball was hiked. Chip took 4 steps back and planted himself, scanning the field, trying to disguise the play. Stevie, out of habit, dropped back to help with the protection. "Get up the field!" Chip screamed at Steve, shoving him with his free hand. "Go, go, go!" Steve, startled back to attention, shot past the onrushing linebackers and dashed up the far sideline. Chip rolled out of the pocket to buy time for his receiver to get up the field. Then he swiveled his head and fixed his attention on Justin, just as Justin was making his cut. He planted his lead leg and pumped a pass in Justin's direction to fake out the defense. As Chip anticipated, Al came dashing over to lower the boom. Justin looked up just in time to see Al coming. He dove to the ground as Al, forearms swinging, flew over him. Then Chip whirled about and looked up the field for Stevie. Stevie had outraced the man covering him, and without the free safety in position to double cover, had managed to break free. Chip reared back and threw the football with every ounce of strength he had, putting his full body weight behind it. The ball shot across the football field at a difficult angle, traveling over 60 yards through the air, as if it had been shot out of a cannon. Even from 60 yards away, Chip could see the startled look on Stevie's face as the ball thudded into his stomach with such force he couldn't have dropped it if he wanted to. Stevie's momentum sent him hurtling into the end zone. Touchdown! Chip's fist shot into the air. He trotted off the field as if he had just completed the easiest pass of his life. All around him, his offensive line was jumping up and down, giving each other high fives, excited by the magnificent pass. On the sidelines, Coach Cutler was beaming with a mixture of euphoria and disbelief. As Chip came nearer, he heard Coach Cutler chortle to Boomer that he had found his quarterback. Standing a few feet behind Cutler, Chip saw Al rip his helmet off and drop kick it halfway across the football field. As Chip watched, Al's helmet bound away. He had the unnerving feeling he was watching his own head roll across the field. Chapter 34. "Thanks for coming with me," Alicia said, standing next to Chip a few evenings later. "No problem," Chip said, peering about the cemetery. On the horizon, the sun was just going down. It would be dark soon. "I wanted to say goodbye to Scott in private," Alicia said. Chip looked about the deserted, spooky-looking cemetery. This was about as private as it got. "Ah," Chip said. "Why don't you come back to school? You haven't been out that long. You can still make up your classes and graduate with your class if you come back now." Alicia didn't answer. She just kept her eyes fixed on Scott's tombstone. Chip had gone to the funeral services yesterday. He hadn't told Alicia. He didn't want her to know how few people had been there. There were almost no mourners besides Scott's family, and Boomer. Boomer in his wheelchair with a dark, bitter smile crimping his face. Alicia had told him that Boomer and Scott had been best friends, and Chip could only imagine the range of painful emotions Boomer must have been feeling at the funeral. Just a few weeks before, Scott had been a local hero. Now Scott's broken and burnt body was just a memory, even while the dirt above his grave was still fresh. Chip wondered if there were so few mourners because Scott was a reminder of the curse that hung over Elm Street, the unseen terror that lurked in every shadow, in every thought of everyone who lived in Springwood. Well, almost everyone. His mother liked it here, and his brother, oddly enough, appeared to be getting used to living on Elm Street. Chip wondered what Al would do after graduation, if he did graduate. Al had no future to prepare for, no dreams or goals, except to be a professional quarterback. And since Chip had been named starting quarterback for tomorrow's game, and probably for the rest of the season unless he got hurt, the chances were remote that Al would be offered a sports scholarship to play quarterback at any college. Now Al's only goal in life is to hate me more, Chip thought morosely. Without me to hate, Al wouldn't even have a life. Before they moved to Elm Street, Chip and Al would toss the football around together, and even though the play was rough, it was still friendly. But since they had moved to the new house, that had all changed. Al and Chip hardly spoke anymore, and Chip was growing more than a little afraid of his big brother. Al had been pumping iron more and more lately, often all night it seemed, and he had bulked up tremendously. He was solid muscle, even with all that junk food he ate down in the basement every night. Chip heard Alicia sniffle. He looked over and saw her face wet with tears. "I really did love Scott," Alicia told Chip, as another tear rolled down her cheek. "I thought right after the murders everything would be all right. He seemed so optimistic about the plastic surgeons and what they could do to repair his face that he could live a normal life again. The wind wailed through the trees that grew alongside the cemetery, bending them to its will. Somewhere in the distance, Chip thought, he heard a siren howl, and howl again, coming closer, growing louder, as the sun sank over the horizon. Alicia removed Scott's letter jacket and wrapped it around the old granite tombstone. "He must be so cold down there," Alicia said, staring at the fresh mound of dirt that covered the casket. "Unless he's burning," Chip thought, "burning in hell." Chip was still unsure of Scott's intentions the night he had died. "Rest in peace, Scott," Alicia said. Chip watched Alicia say her gentle goodbye. She looked so lovely, even though such intense sadness. When she looked up and saw him staring, her expression warmed even more. Then her eyes darted away from Chip's face, over his shoulder, and she gasped. "Alicia, what is it?" Chip's head shot in that direction that she was staring. He saw nothing, just a rat perched on top of a gravestone, staring at them, before scampering away. "Johnny?" Alicia's eyes were wide with disbelief, still staring up the gently sloping hill of tombstones. "I just saw Johnny Murphy." "Where?" Chip's eyes scanned the area, looking for Johnny, looking for anyone. "Up by Ellen Sawyer's gravestone," Alicia said, pointing. Her finger was trembling. "He was hiding behind it, spying on us." Chip looked in that direction that she was pointing, but still saw no one. Just the setting sun dipping beneath the horizon line as the evening sky turned to a soft gray. The wind suddenly picked up and swirled about their feet. "I met Johnny's uncle and he told me Johnny tried to hang himself," Chip said. "I know," Alicia said. "His heart stopped and he was dead for several minutes, but they cut him down in time to revive him." "He's still in the hospital, isn't he?" Chip asked. "Are you sure it was him?" "I'm not sure. It was hard to tell who I saw. He had his hood pulled up around his head." Chip felt a chill go through him. "He was wearing a hood?" "Yes," Alicia said without hesitation. Chip's eyes drank in the area around Ellen's gravestone. Shadows danced across her mound of dirt, also fairly fresh, cast by a pale moon shining through the branches of an ancient maple tree. The sky was rapidly growing a soft charcoal color. A few stars came out, faint but growing, as the wind picked up again. "Come on, I'll walk you home," Chip said, feeling increasingly nervous in the cemetery as the night grew darker. Johnny or no Johnny, Alicia seemed certain there was someone spying on them. Chip and Alicia locked hands and hurried toward the cemetery entrance. Chip looked up when he heard a fluttering sound. Several dark shadows dipped and twirled in the air above, making zigzag patterns, flying erratically. "Bats," Alicia said, turning her face to the darkening sky. "The woods are full of them." Chip picked up his pace. The surrounding trees were hulking, dark, full of hungry eyes that followed their every step. "Before, on the way over here, when we were talking about Evan and his uncle and the house and stuff, didn't you tell me Dr. Hawk's heart stopped?" "Yeah?" "Scott said the same thing, and they got it going again, right?" Again, Alicia nodded. "And they found Johnny dead and got his heart going again too, right?" Alicia said nothing for a few moments. "What do you think it means?" "You tell me," Chip said, his voice quaking a little. But Scott believed an evil spirit entered Dr. Hawk's body, like taking over an empty shell. "He also thought it took over me," Alicia reminded him. Chip paused. "Yeah, I guess you're right." He pushed the macabre thought to the back of his mind. "You think it's in Johnny now, don't you?" Alicia asked, as if reading his mind. An owl hooted nearby. Chip heard a crack, like a twig breaking in the woods just ahead of them. Then a rustling of dead leaves. Chip tensed his body, ready to fight whatever it was that lay ahead of them. Maybe he could hold it off long enough for Alicia to get away. Something darted out of the woods at them. Alicia uttered a startled cry of surprise, and Chip leapt back as a raccoon scampered out of the woods, spotted them, and then shot back into the woods again. Chip relaxed his taut muscles. He could hear Alicia's heart pounding, or was it his own? Still, hand in hand, they began to jog. Chip realized that it had been a mistake to go to the cemetery that late. Night comes too quickly to the autumn sky, and the Elm Street Cemetery was no place to linger after dark, not if you wanted to stay above ground. Chip strained to see up the dark path, watching out for things they might trip over. Beside him, he could hear Alicia breathing heavily as she tried to keep up with him. Chip imagined he heard whispering all about, saw dark hooded forms hunkering behind every tree and bush with eyes staring out at them, switchblades gleaming through the blackness. The murmuring in the woods seemed to grow louder as the wind thrashed a tall oak tree, sending down a painful shower of hard acorns. They ran faster, their sneakers crunching on the flat, dead leaves. Scraggly, thorny bushes growing alongside the trail tore at their jeans as they ran by. Finally, they reached a clearing in the woods. The sirens Chip had heard before were louder now. A short distance away, he saw the back of his house in shadow against the dark sky. The TV antenna hung from the chimney at a crooked angle, as if lightning had struck it. In fact, everything about the house looked crooked to Chip, and yet it was a welcome sight after their harrowing run through the dark woods. He stopped to catch his breath, to breathe a sigh of relief, to give his thudding heart a chance to slow down. Alicia stopped next to him, holding her side as she gasped for air. Their hot breaths steamed the cold night air with wisps of white. The wailing sirens stopped, and their silence filled Chip with dread. They had sounded so close. Too close. They crossed the clearing to the back fence that bordered his yard. Chip shot one last glance over his shoulders to make sure they hadn't been followed. He felt unsteady, shaky, as if he might burst out screaming. They hadn't run fast enough or far enough. On the other side of the clearing was the hooded figure, his breath steaming up about his face, staring back at them with lunatic eyes. Chapter 35. "Hurry, we've got to hop the fence," Chip said to Alicia. Chip climbed the back fence first so he could help Alicia over next, but when he landed on the other side, his foot hit something and he toppled forward, his arms and legs sprawling as he fell. He sat up, his gaze scanning the moonlit yard to see what had tripped him up. It was the odd-looking clay girl, half burned in the loose dirt. He had stepped on its head, crushing it. "Chip, are you all right?" came Alicia's voice from the other side of the white picket fence, and then Chip saw part of her body rise above it. He clambered to his feet and helped her over, staring past her across the clearing to where the hooded figure had stood. There was nothing there. They cut through his backyard. In the driveway, Chip saw Al's white van parked next to their mother's station wagon. Al hadn't been home a little while ago. And why was his mother home? She had said she'd be working late. They made their way past the vehicles and onto Elm Street. Chip walked Alicia the short distance to her house and said goodbye before Alicia's creepy mother could come to the door. As Chip approached his own house, he saw old Nick Murphy hurrying toward him as fast as his elderly legs would carry him. "Is she all right?" Mr. Murphy asked, his leathery face filled with worry. "Is who all right?" Chip asked. "Your mother." Chip felt his head swim. "What happened?" he asked, his voice a harsh, raspy whisper. He felt a lump grow in his throat as he looked quickly at his house. It was totally dark, except for a dim light shining through the broken basement window. "I don't know," Mr. Murphy said, scratching his thick patch of white hair with gnarly yellow tobacco-stained fingers. "They took her away in an ambulance not more than 10 minutes ago." The sirens he had heard running home from the cemetery. They had been for his mother. "Oh, God, no!" a voice inside Chip's head screamed. "Al murdered Mom!" Chapter 36. Chip rushed into the house. He found the basement door open, the stairs in almost total darkness. He flicked on the light. A naked bulb, the one he had replaced just that morning, blinked on at the bottom of the stairs, barely penetrating the gloom. Chip heard voices coming from the basement. Then he saw in the light cast by the naked bulb the splattered blood. Fresh, glistening blood. His mother's blood? Chip gasped. The sight filled him with dread. He had to find out what had happened, and if Al was responsible. Chip gripped the staircase banister with the sweaty palm and started his way down. The bottom seemed like 1,000,000 miles away, at the end of a long, dark tunnel. When he reached the basement, he saw that the office door was open a crack. Light was bleeding out. From inside the office, Chip heard voices. Chip carefully stepped around the puddle of blood and made his way to the door. "Al?" he called, bracing himself, not knowing what to expect. The voices stopped. "Al!" Chip shouted, reaching for the door. Suddenly, Al stepped out of the small office, closing the door behind him. He was wearing the hooded sweatshirt he always wore when he lifted weights, and he was sweaty. Chip stared at his brother. "What?" Al asked impatiently. "I'm busy, punk." "What are you doing in there?" "I'm taking a break from pumping iron. I like to sit in that goofy chair. It's comfortable." Al shifted his weight nervously from one foot to another. "So now that you know what I do in my spare time, why don't you scram?" "Who are you talking to in there?" Chip asked. He was too angry to be intimidated. Al hesitated for a moment, his eyes shifting to the door, then back to Chip. "No one." "Don't give me that, Al. I heard you talking to someone." Chip could tell his brother was lying. "I was talking to myself, all right?" "You've been talking to yourself an awful lot lately." "So?" A smug expression crossed Al's face. "What's it to you?" Chip's gaze shifted to the crimson splatter, then back to Al. "What happened to Mom?" Al nonchalantly unwrapped the tape from his wrist. His hands were all chalky, and there was blood on them. "Mom had a little accident." "What kind of accident?" Chip asked, his voice rising. "I guess she tripped, fell down the basement stairs," Al said with a smirk. "She really should be more careful. Watch where she's going." Chip punched Al as hard as he could, punched him right in the face, right in the middle of his big, ugly smirk. The punch sounded unusually loud to him, like a cartoon sound effect. Al staggered back a few steps and would have fallen if it hadn't been for the office door. He leaned against the door, dazed. But Chip wasn't done with him yet. The image of his mother, her body lying broken and bleeding on the basement floor, filled him with rage. White, hot, murderous rage. "I'll kill you!" Chip screamed at Al, advancing toward him, hatred in his eyes. His hands rolled into fists at his sides, clubs to smash Al with. I'm going to jam those barbells right up your, you stupid jerk!" Al spat at him, spat blood from his bloody mouth. Then he whipped out his switchblade. He flicked the knife open with a well-practiced motion and held the weapon menacingly in front of him. "I didn't do anything to your mother. I found her at the bottom of the stairs when I got home and I called 911. I don't know what happened to her. I wasn't even here. You can ask her yourself if you don't believe me." "Liar!" "Am I?" Al asked, making little circles with the gleaming knife blade. "Am I? So prove it. Come here and prove it." Chip took a few steps backward, keeping his eyes on his brother. Then he spun around and raced up the basement stairs. He yanked the kitchen wall phone off its cradle, got the hospital phone number from information, and quickly punched it in. After a few inquiries, he discovered his mother was in the intensive care unit. He waited impatiently in the dark kitchen while they put him through to someone else. He kept his eyes glued to the top of the basement stairs, expecting Al to come at him at any moment. Another voice came on the line and told him that his mother was still unconscious but in stable condition. They had no more information for him. Chip said thank you and hung up the phone. Mom was stable. He wished he could say the same thing about himself. Chip heard the basement stairs creak as Al came up for him. Al stood in the dim light at the top of the stairs, dabbing his bloody lip with the tape he had unraveled from his wrist, leaving little red marks on the binding. "You made me bleed, you little punk," Al said, his eyes burning with hatred. "And now you're gonna pay, big time." Chip stood frozen, his body tense, waiting for his brother to make the next move. "Your day has come at last," Al said, ominously, challenging his brother with his eyes as he dabbed blood from his lips. Chip could see the bulge in Al's sweatpants pocket where he knew the knife was. Or maybe I should say your night has come. Your last night. Chip's eyes quickly swept the dark kitchen, looking for a knife to even up the odds. A big butcher knife would do, but all he saw was his mother's wooden stirring spoon and the dirty pot covered with curry gook. He'd throw the whole damn mess on Al. Okay, bro, we'll do it tonight. Tonight we'll get down. Right now, Chip said. Nah, Al said. I'll pick the time. I think I'll make you squirm first. I like to watch you squirm. Squirm like a stuck pig. But tonight's the night, bro. You're right about that. Tonight we get down. Al smirked. Then he went out the side kitchen door. Chip heard him start the van. The headlights from the van suddenly lit the kitchen in garish yellow colors as he backed down the driveway. Then the lights rolled out of the kitchen and the van headed down Elm Street, and everything was quiet, except for Chip's thundering heart, and his heavy breathing, and the frenzied thoughts whirring about inside his head, chattering aloud, dark prophecies to him. Now it was just a matter of time. Chip knew, just a matter of time before all hell exploded like a fiery volcano, with Al the center of the eruption, swimming in the molten lava of his own hatred. Chapter 37. Chip went up to his bedroom and shut the door. That never seemed to latch. He pushed the futon against the door to keep it closed, and to warn him if anyone should try to get in. He lay down and stared out the window at the skeletal branches of the elm tree. Its branches were being tossed about by the wind, making the inside of his room come alive with jagged shadows. He kicked off his sneakers. Maybe he should shut the window and lock them. But he was so tired, too tired to get up now, that he was lying down. Maybe later, after he'd slept a little. He was exhausted. He needed rest badly. He had to be ready when Al returned, because Al never slept, it seemed. Chip's body felt as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. His head as heavy as a cannonball. His eyelids could no longer resist the pull of gravity. He needed sleep. Sleep. As he lay there, he listened for sounds outside his bedroom door. Sounds of Al sneaking back in. Sounds of Al moving up the stairs. Sounds of Al coming to get him. But all he heard was the eerie creaking and groaning the old house made as it tried to settle itself. The house couldn't sleep either. Chip heard Al's van drive up, the headlights rolling through his bedroom and creating a whir of distorted shadows on the walls. He heard the engine shut off, the van door open and slam shut, and then the bang of the kitchen door that told him Al was inside the house. He listened for a while. No more sounds for long, heavy seconds, and then voices came up the air vent. The wood he'd tossed in the stove crackled as it caught fire. Chip could feel the warmth begin to spread through the room. Bang! The little metal trap door on the cast-iron stove clanked open. Chip gaped in disbelief. Eerie red smoke was pouring out of the top of the stove. Chapter 38. The shock of the dream woke her. Alicia sat up in bed, her body bathed in sweat. The nightmare had seemed so real, so horrifyingly real. In her dream, Johnny Murphy had attacked her in the basement of Chip's house. He had grabbed her and was dragging her to the furnace, his lunatic eyes burning like red rubies. And in the glowing red of his pupils she saw tiny fire-breathing dragons. She swung her feet out of bed and let them hit the cold, bare, wooden floor. She sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the voices downstairs. Voices? Downstairs? Who was downstairs at this time of night? Her mother seldom spoke to anyone during the day. Alicia threw on her terry cloth robe and quietly slipped out of her room. She padded to the head of the stairs. Her mother had the front door open and was talking to two men. both dressed in dull gray suits, the expressions on their faces as somber as their colorless clothing. They were apologizing to her mother for disturbing her at this late hour, and then they were talking away. Alicia came halfway down the stairs, alarmed by the pale expression on her mother's face. "Mom, what is it?" "The police," her mother said, her voice becoming shrill. Alicia felt her heart start to pound. "What did they say?" "Johnny Murphy escaped from the insane asylum Friday night. He was in the hospital wing, and they weren't guarding him that closely because they thought he was too feeble to get out of bed. But apparently he made a remarkable recovery. The police are canvassing all the neighborhoods, telling everyone to be on the lookout for him." Friday night, Alicia thought. That was days ago. And they're only warning us now? "They should have come to Elm Street first if they wanted to find a madman." Her mother's voice was bitter. "Elm Street's the devil's playground." She stumbled back to the living room couch, mumbling incoherently. Alicia wondered if Elm Street had claimed her mother's mind as well. But she couldn't distract herself with thoughts like that. She had to warn Chip. Now she was sure it was Johnny she had seen at the cemetery. Had Johnny been hiding at the cemetery since Friday night? It didn't seem likely. Someone would have spotted him by now. A caretaker, maybe, or one of Scott's mourners. Then a chilling thought struck her. She remembered Chip telling her about the secret passageway that connected to his basement. The tunnel that led to the woods outside his house. The woods that separated his house from the Elm Street cemetery. And now she knew where Johnny was hiding. She ran up to her room, threw on her clothes, then hurried back down the stairs. Her heart pounded with pile driver force. She prayed she wasn't too late. As she raced through the living room on her way to the front door, her mother called to her. "Where do you think you're going?" Alicia stopped and spun around. It always seemed dark in her house, even in the daytime. More shadows for her mother to hide in. "Where are you going?" her mother repeated, her voice gripped with panic. Alicia didn't answer her. "You're going back there, aren't you?" her mother screeched. "You're going back to the devil's house!" Alicia grabbed a down jacket from the coat rack in the foyer and slipped it on as she hurried out the door. "Come back!" Alicia heard her mother's cry from the front door. "Come back before it's too late!" Chapter 39. Chip sat up and stared at the stove, at the smoke coming out. He knew he wasn't dreaming this time. He moved across the futon as far as he could until his back hit the bedroom door. The eerie red smoke reformed into the ghost of Evan Walker. Evan turned his eyeless sockets toward Chip. Chip felt his mind coming unhinged as he stared back at the ghost. Evan drifted across the room till his red form was directly over the air vent. He pointed down the same way he had a few nights before. A chilly breeze blew through the window, and the red mist dissolved into the cold air. Voices filtered up the air vent. Chip's forehead beaded with tiny cold dots of sweat. Chip went over, got down on his hands and knees, put his ear to the open vent and listened. Had to do it. No choice. Mother would have thrown you out. Finish her off. Trust me. Finish him off. We're brothers. Red Dragon brothers in blood. The house will be yours. Martin would have burned the house. Clubhouse. I took care of Martin. You take care of Alicia to prove to me and the Brotherhood. He numbered 1. Needs to be done. He's the son of Krueger. Chip off the old block. He's the son of Krueger? Chip could only hear broken pieces of the conversation, and thought, I'm the son of Krueger. Freddy Krueger's my father. No way, Chip whispered harshly to himself. Who was making those insane accusations? Whoever it was had something to do with his mother's accident and the murder of Scott Martin. Now he wanted Al to kill him and Alicia. Tonight. Chip kept his ear pressed to the vent. It was so hard to hear. He could understand only little bits here and there, just snatches of conversation. Chip off the old block. He'll get you if you don't get me. Only a matter of time. Get him first. It's us against them. Brothers in blood. Be a winner. Destroy the evidence. Burn him after you. Chip felt his blood pumping in his temples. He had to do something, but what? He had an idea. Chip frantically dug his Walkman out of a canvas bag he still hadn't unpacked. He could record the conversation on tape and give it to the police. He just had to get close enough to do it. The voices coming up the air vent were too garbled, and his Walkman wasn't that great to begin with. He'd have to go down into the basement. Chip tugged on his sneakers and stood up, determined. He slipped the tiny Walkman into his jeans pocket and pulled the futon away from the door. Slowly, silently, carefully, he cracked the door and peered down the darkened hallway. The coast looked clear. He crept down the hallway, trying to keep the floorboards from creaking, and made his way into the kitchen. He looked in one drawer after another until he found what he was looking for. The big knife his mother used to slice her homemade bread. The very big, extremely sharp knife. He slid it into his belt, like a sword, and made his way to the top of the basement stairs. He hesitated a moment. It wasn't too late to run. He felt as if his limbs were drugged, too heavy to make them go to the stairs or run away. He knew he had to do this, or he'd live in fear, looking over his shoulder always. He could hear them down there, whispering, chattering, their conspiratorial voices drifting up to him. Chip inched his way down the stairs, willing his legs to stop trembling and to move, wincing at every squeak he made, until he was at the bottom. He stepped over the blood splatter, another reminder of his mother's fall, and crossed the basement floor to where a crack of light showed beneath the door of the old examination room. The voices were coming from in there. Chip knelt down and peeked in the keyhole. The fire in the furnace was roaring. There were two hooded figures in the room standing just below the vent. They had their sleeves rolled up past their elbows and were carving red lines, bloody lines, into their arms, with identical red dragon switchblade knives. One of the hooded figures turned toward him. It was Al, grinning like a panting dog. Then the other hooded figure turned. Dark, maniacal eyes peered out from the dark triangle of the hood, eyes that glowed bright red. Chip remembered that face from the summer football league. Johnny Murphy. Chip watched in dazed horror as Al and Johnny smeared their bloodied arms together. "Now we're one of the same blood, now and forever," Johnny said in a mesmerizing voice, his psychotic eyes boring into Al, as if hypnotizing him. Eyes that burned like bright red rubies, just like in Chip's dream. Al nodded dumbly, a lurid grin stretching the skin ludicrously tight across his face. "All others must die." "All others must die," Al repeated, as if in a trance. "Ashes to ashes," Johnny said. "Ashes to ashes," Al repeated. The eerie glow from the crackling fire made their faces look like skulls. "They're planning to kill me," Chip thought, as another chill cut through his body. "And stuff me in the furnace, like the others before me and the others after me." Chip could feel his chest heave as he tried to keep from hyperventilating, his eyes still glued to the keyhole. Then a tremendously loud pounding on the side door upstairs distracted him. Still kneeling, he shot a glance over his shoulder. More pounding. Then he heard his name called. "Chip! Chip!" Alicia's voice. The examination room door suddenly burst open. Startled, Chip toppled backward. Al and Johnny stared down at him. Two sets of wild, homicidal eyes boring into him like laser beams, their switchblades still in their hands. At first they seemed surprised to see him there, and then happy. Al was still grinning his lurid grin. Well, 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 look who's here. Save us the trouble of coming up to get you." More pounding on the door upstairs. "Chip! Chip!" Alicia's voice was frantic. "Hell, hell, the gang's all here," Johnny sang in a grotesquely cheerful voice. Panic-stricken, still on the basement floor, Chip began to pull the long cutting knife out of his belt, but Al easily kicked it away, out of reach. Johnny loped across the basement floor to the foot of the stairs. "Come on down and join the party," he shouted up to Alicia in Chip's voice, Chip's identical voice. Chip stared at Johnny with a bewildered expression. Even Al's eyes flickered nervously. "Chip?" came Alicia's voice from the top of the stairs, sounding small and far away. "Is that you? Are you all right?" "Down here," Johnny said in Chip's voice. "Alicia Norris, come on down!" Johnny bellowed enthusiastically, as if he were a game show host. Alicia hesitated at the top of the stairs. "Allie, run!" Chip shouted. "Alicia Norris, come on down!" Johnny called again in a cheerful version of Chip's voice. Alicia came partway down the stairs, then froze, her mouth locked in shock and terror. "Run!" Chip shouted again. He knew he was doomed, but maybe she could still escape. Chip watched as Johnny beckoned to Alicia with his finger. Only now the fingernails were long and sharp, and it had turned black like an animal's claw. "I want you to meet someone special," Johnny said, this time in a voice that was oddly metallic and inhuman. "Yeah, Alicia," Al said, his voice hollow. "Johnny's been telling me some mighty interesting things I thought you might like to know. Seems he did a little digging around in the state hospital files before he broke out. He found Krueger's old file. Turns out Krueger had a son after all, and he really was a chip off the old block. And guess who it is?" "Yeah, guess," Johnny said, his eyes glistening madly, glowing red like the furnace fire across the room as he kept beckoning to Alicia to come down the stairs with fingers that were now growing long and knife-like, razor-sharp fingers. Chip thought his mind might come unglued. The furnace fire crackled loudly. "I'd like you all to meet my son. He's a chip off the old block." Johnny's voice had turned rough and gravelly, like he had a throat full of ground-up glass. Then Johnny walked over to Al and gave him an affectionate squeeze on the shoulder with a razory hand. "Say hello to the nice people at home, Al Frederick." Johnny tugged down his hood. Then he pulled a fleshy mask off his face with a sickening tear. The face underneath was hideously scarred and melted, the slimy brains exposed and shining like a bowl of glistening oatmeal. Chip couldn't take his eyes off the savage, brutal face, frozen in terror. He was stuck to the ground like a fly caught in a spider's web. Alicia screamed. Al slowly turned his head toward Johnny, his face filling with horror. "Dad?" Al rasped in disbelief. The boiler fire flickered madly. Freddy Krueger cackled loudly. His raspy voice breaking through Alicia's screams, his foul, disgusting breath filling the basement air with a stench worse than decaying meat. He smiled, revealing 2 uneven rows of small, brown, rotten teeth. "The game of life's a lot like football, but this is one game I think's gonna end in sudden death." Krueger smiled wickedly at Al. "Right, son?" "Right, Dad," Al replied in a hoarse whisper, the words choking him. His pale blue eyes lit up and burned brightly with madness. "It's so great to meet you after all these years. I knew someday my wish would come true." Then Al slammed the red dragon switchblade knife into Krueger's heart. Krueger tottered backward, shock registering on his hideous face. A razory hand gripped the red dragon handle of the knife sticking out of his heart. He staggered toward the open examination room door and almost stepped on Chip. Chip rode out of the way and rose shakily to his feet, his mind numb with the horror unfolding before him. Suddenly, Krueger's mouth dropped open, and flames shot out as he pulled the knife out of his heart and plunged it into Al's skull. He braced himself against the doorframe, with his other hand struggling not to fall. Al fell to his knees. The knife jutted grotesquely out of his head, adrenaline pumping through his system. Chip bolted past Al. He ran across the basement floor and headed for the stairs. He ran partway up the stairs, tripped, and slipped back down the stairs. He flashed a terror-filled glance over his shoulder. Krueger pointed at him, then at the furnace fire. "You're up next," he said, and cackled loudly. Chip screamed hysterically, unable to move. Then suddenly Alicia was at his side. She yanked him to his feet. "We've got to get out of here," Alicia shrieked, shaking Chip, shaking him hard, shaking him out of his dazed state. "No!" Krueger roared in a husky voice, still clinging to the doorway, blood dripping from his heart. "You're mine! "You're mine!" Chip's stare swiveled to Krueger. Krueger's eyes were shining a bright red, drawing him into the examination room, drawing him into the fire, drawing him with irresistible force. Then Al, the knife still sticking repulsively in his skull, suddenly leapt from the floor and slammed into Krueger with a football tackle, slammed into him with all his might, as if he had been shot out of a cannon. Al drove Krueger back into the fire, his momentum carrying both of them into the glowing furnace. And then the boiler door slammed shut with a resounding clang as Chip and Alicia escaped up the stairs and out into the chilly night. Epilogue. Fire was everywhere. The hellish flames licked all around the tall, angular man, climbing their way up his body. With razor-tipped fingers, he tossed a football into the air. It burst into flames and exploded in a shower of sparks that rained down over his striped football jersey. "I love a good halftime show," Freddy Krueger said, adjusting the shoulder pads and slicing a rip into the fabric of his uniform. His red eyes glowed, and the pupils turned into little TVs. On the screens, Chip and Alicia were racing out of the house on Elm Street. "But you know what they say, it's not over till it's over." Okay, Slashaholics, the end. This has been the end. Okay, Slashaholics, this has been Freddy Krueger's Tales of Terror number 2, Fatal Games by Bruce Richards. I gotta say, this was a hard one to get through. I thought it had promise throughout the book. I was having fun trying to guess who the Freddy in disguise might be, who he was possessing, but it just felt like the author didn't know how to fill that little of pages. Like he had maybe a 300-page book planned out, and a lot of plot lines just really didn't get resolved. There wasn't really a whole lot of kills in this book compared to David Bergantino's, and the reveal was just really disappointing. Because, I was thinking maybe the mom or Al, and, the whole quarterback thing didn't really get resolved. Al was just a dick all the way through the book, and then all of a sudden he's been talking to Freddy the whole time in disguise as of a character that we haven't really seen until the end of the book. Just somebody that was talked about a couple times, and all of a sudden Al is Freddy's son, Al Frederick or whatever. And I don't know, it was just really lame. And the way Freddy got killed was lame. He wasn't in the book enough. I know these books don't give Freddy a lot of pages, but David made it work and made it fun. There was way better kills and stuff. This one, the characters, it was just all over the place. It just felt really rushed at the end. Like there was a lot of plot threads that could still be tied up that didn't get to be. I was really disappointed. The characters were not that interesting. I feel like maybe about 50 pages of this could have been cut, and we could have just cut out all that football stuff. Is that the Fatal Games? At least in David's books, the title kind of ties into what's going on in the book. What's the Fatal Games here? Football? Because, Al's a meathead, weightlifting dickhead that hurts people that get positions on the team that he wants. And I don't think this author knows much about Freddy. He didn't incorporate dreams very much with Freddy. And Freddy, once again, it's not a glove he's wearing. This author has it where it's like actual claws, like on the cover of the book. I think he saw the cover of the first book or something. He's like, oh, it's Freddy's hand. He's never seen New Nightmare or something. I don't know. Freddy getting stabbed in the heart, and then all of a sudden Al's the hero. He's been setting this up the whole book, finally gets the reveal, and stabs Freddy in the heart because why? He loves his fucking brother? He hates his brother. I don't get it. He laughed about his mom falling down the stairs. So why? He threatened to kill Chip. So why all of a sudden does he save his brother like that? And why is Freddy so fucked up about getting stabbed in the heart? He's supposed to be immortal or whatever. I don't know. I give this book, out of 10, I'd give it like a 2. Let me know what you guys think. I'm curious to hear what you thought of this book. But yeah, the reveal and stuff just was not... I didn't care for it. I do wish that I had read the first book in the series before this one and narrated it for the channel. I did not know that the second book was going to tie so heavily into the events of the first book. But I will still narrate book number 1, Blind Date, which is apparently about Alicia and other characters mentioned in this book. And it's also by Bruce Richards, and it's also the final book to be narrated in this series. After I finish it, every single official Freddy Krueger book ever written will be narrated on the channel. Somebody tells me there's like a 60-page picture novelization of Freddy's Dead. If anybody can find that and get it to me, I will definitely narrate that as well if you want me to. I will be narrating very soon Freddy vs. Ash, a fan novel. So be sure to check that out. Until then, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying thanks for listening, be excellent to each other, and I'll see you soon. Hey there, Slashaholics. This is your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian with an exciting offer for you. You can go to www.80stees.com right now and find shirts from your favorite TV shows, movies, cartoons, horror movies, video games, and more. And there's so much more than just shirts. So head on over to 80stees.com where we've partnered up to bring you an amazing offer. 30% off your purchase at checkout with promo code /tracks30.